We have already created an app service, a mobile app service from our Azure portal. It's time for us to connect that app service that we have just created to our Xamarin Forms application. And to do that, we're going to head back to the Azure portal. But before, we have to add some packages, some Node.js packages to our solution. These Node.js packages are going to allow us to easily connect to these kind of services and easily use the features that these services have. So I am going to navigate to the Solution Explorer and I am going to right click on the solution. I am going to select Manage Node.js Packages for Solution and I am going to search for Microsoft.azure.mobile.client. And once you find the Microsoft.azure.mobile.client package, you can select it and we're going to be installing it on every single project that is inside of the solution. The Portable Class Library, the Android and the iOS project as well. Now currently, the latest stable version is not compatible with the default Xamarin Forms template that we selected when we created the app, so we can change this to be the 3.1.0 version. This will work very similarly to version 4, and for what we are going to be using the mobile service, it's going to work perfectly. So we can select this one and click on Install. As always, we're going to see a preview of the changes that are going to be made, the packages that are going to be added to the iOS project, to the PCL project, and to the Android project. So now we can click on OK, accept the license, and once the process is finished, if you see one of these alerts, you'll have to restart Visual Studio. So I am going to click on Restart, and while Visual Studio restarts, I am going to navigate to the Azure portal. So back in the Azure portal, I am going to navigate to the Travel Record App mobile app service that I have just created. And right now I'm on the Overview tab. But we need to navigate to the Deployment section and select Quick Start. In here, we have to set one more thing inside of our service. And while doing that, we will also find some code that we have to add to our project. In fact, inside of the Quick Start, you're going to see Quick Starts for all of the platforms that the app service supports. One of them being Xamarin Forms. So we can select it and notice that it lists 3 elements that you have to complete in order to be able to have your application up and running. The first one is to create a data connection, and we already have it. But the second one is to create a table API. All of the tables are going to have some scripts that are going to be defining how these tables work, what happens when a new insert is performed, or an update, etc. And by default, they already have the functionality. We don't have to change anything. But in case we do, we need to select a backend language. And in here, you're going to have 2 options, Node.js or C#. In this case, I am going to leave the default selection. And I am going to select this checkbox and select Create to Do Item Table. This is going to set the API for the application and will create a table inside of the app service. And while this is being set and the table is being created, we can navigate to the third option, which is to connect to a client application. And in here we can either create a new application, which we are not going to do, or connect to an existing application, which we already have, and that is exactly the option that we have to select. All we have to find in here is the first code section, in which an object is defined. An object of type mobile service client. And this object and its constructor is going to require the app service URL. So we can copy this code and notice that the app service has been initialized. So the second step is also performed. And just to check that it is actually created, we can navigate to the mobile section and select Easy Tables. And you will see how the to-do item table has been created. Now we do not need this, and if you remember, we had created that table before, but since we have changed the settings for this app service, this has been deleted and we should do it again. So I am going to delete this table by clicking on the options and select delete, and then I am going to create the post table again. I am going to click on OK, and it's going to be there again. Now it's time to head back to Visual Studio and paste the code that we have just copied. So back in Visual Studio, where we should paste the code is of course in the Portable Class Library, but more specifically in the app.xaml.cs because we want this object to be available all the time, just like we have with the database location. So right below it, I'm going to paste that code. And notice that this is a definition of an object, a static object of type mobile service client that is being initialized to a new mobile service client with a string or with the URL for the service. Of course, to be able to use this class, we're going to have to add a using directive. So I'm going to type Ctrl dot on my keyboard and select the first option, which is to add a using directive to Microsoft.Windows Azure.mobile service. This namespace comes from the latest package that we have just added to our project. And this object is exactly the one that we are going to be using to perform all of the operations that require connection to the mobile service. And so now that we have this and everything is ready, we have the mobile app service ready, and we have the application already with this object that is going to allow us to connect to that mobile service. In the next lecture, we have to start by adding some registration functionality. So a user can register themselves into the application, but now, instead of just logging them in when something is written in the entries, we are actually going to evaluate their credentials with the mobile service.